Now, so let's welcome Gaston and Ruben on stage with their talk about Peregrine, their CMS, their Sling-based CMS.
Hi everybody, I'm Ruben. This is Mr. Gaston over here. We work for Headwire. We mainly integrate AEM for customers, but a couple of years ago started a CMS as well, just because, right? There was no CMS in Sling. Now there are suddenly 3 that are open source. But before we really start the talk, I would basically, this is a great venue and a great conference, and why don't we give a round of applause to our organizers for once? Thank you. We come back all the time, and we're actually located in California, and it's really worth the flight to come here. So, Mr. Gaston, I think we should do a demo, right?
Yeah, let's start with the demo.
Demos are great. There were so many talks about Kubernetes, that's what they call it, right?
Kubernetes, yeah.
Kubernetes, okay. I always get that wrong. Do you think we can try a demo, or do we have to go like regular jar install and do that kind of stuff?
No, I think we can play with Google Kubernetes Engine. We actually have something running in the cloud already. So let's actually take a look at our cluster. We have a 2-node GKE cluster running in the cloud, so hopefully this demo doesn't go sideways since I don't have a local instance running. And just in case everything blows up, we also have one set of the Peregrine stack running in the cloud. So we have 2 Apache instances, one for author, one for publish, and the Peregrine pod itself. So pretty straightforward. If we switch back to the presentation, we've maintained a reference implementation for the Helm chart for Peregrine. It brings with it 2 Apache instances and a single author of Peregrine. So getting started is really quite simple. You basically install Helm on your machine, point it at our Helm repository, and then in one line run Helm install the name of your release along with our Docker image. So let's go ahead and provision now. Helm install. We'll give it a name. Let's call it Boom, just in case it blows up. And Peregrine. It's going to the cloud, so hopefully it won't fail us.
Looks like the cloud this afternoon is not happy with people.
I think people might be downloading stuff on YouTube right now.
Yeah, stop that, please.
Oh, come on. Okay, well that's running. Let me switch over to, oh, there it goes, hold on. Perfect. So while this is going in the background, I'll go ahead and list some of our Kubernetes pods, and you can get a sense for what has been, or in the process of being deployed right now. So you notice we have 6 pods now. The ones that have Boom in the name are the ones that we've just recently provisioned. The 2 Apache ones are already up and running. So we have here the stage instance, it's up and running, and then we also have the Peregrine instance and the live instance. So this will take a bit of time. We're also provisioning a Google load balancer right now on the fly. So if we poll for the services, we should see 2 load balancers coming up, one for the Apache instance for live and one for stage. One of them actually looks like it's already up, and the other one's in a pending state. So let me actually see if I can get the live one to resolve for us. So this should just be a pointer to the like a stub Peregrine page that will have the header and footer for the Peregrine site. There we go, perfect. And let me see if the second service has come up for the authoring instance so we can actually start to get into Peregrine and get a sense for what's going on. So it looks like it's still in the pending state, so let me switch back to the presentation. And let me describe really quickly what's happening here. So with Helm, we're able to describe our application, the full stack in its entirety. So off to the left, we're using a Kubernetes Peregrine stateful set. This allows us to basically allow an application with state like Sling that requires data to be terminated while maintaining persistent volumes. At this point, we just have one persistent volume claim and then a persistent volume that's attaching for its storage. We have the Peregrine service. This is a Kubernetes service that allows the pods to do service discovery and communicate between each other. And then for the Apache stack, we actually are using a replica set since these are completely stateless, and we don't care if they get recreated and the data is destroyed. So we have one replica set for live and one for our stage instance. And as we've seen earlier, we can actually replicate these out by adding 2, 3 nodes on the fly and let Kubernetes manage that for us. And then we have a service layer again for each of those. And then in our case, for Google JKE, we're using the ingress, so we can do SSL termination on the front. So switching back to the demo, if we take a look at our services, hopefully the staging instance has provisioned, and it has. And now we should be able to go back and start editing in Peregrine. So I'll hand it back to you, Chief.
Well, yeah, so Stefan was actually, I asked him before we prepped the talk whether it would be okay to try to reproduce or parts of the adaptTo website. And he said yes, so thank you very much. So I'll go in and author the whole adaptTo website. No, I won't do that. I will just basically show you how to create a new page and a new site. So we can create the new site really quickly. Wow, where's that? Author discovery. We have a theme with components prepared that's actually stock in Peregrine. So I can give it a name. I'll name it adapt if I can type. Bear with me, it's a Mac. What the heck is going on? I probably don't. Okay. Let's give it a second. And again, there must be something not that well with the network this afternoon. I think we saw that in the last hack. Okay, it came up. I can go into a site. There's a basic structure. I'll just create a new page real quick. And we have template system, but we'll just use a regular page. And I'll call it hello. And basically, you get to the page afterwards. Almost. Bear with me, please. And now I can basically just start creating the adaptTo website, right? And if I have it up here, the adaptTo website looks a little bit like this, right? So let's go scaffold that. Of course, I know all the components already, so very easy for me. I'll add a component with an image. That's kind of the top, right? We have some, you can add the components empty like in AEM, or you can have them with some basic content in it already. And if I go down here, I don't want to go too long on this, but I can switch the image over. I can add a header. I can add a layout container, things like that, right? So I did this before because there could be issues, right? And this is actually how the page looks afterwards. So just stock components a little bit, like choosing colors, whatever, right? So this kind of looks like the adaptTo website. Of course, I took some creative freedoms because not all of our components matched, right? So this header here is not correct. But it does its job. And Peregrine was actually built for speed. And if I run the Google Chrome audit on it, we'll see that we have a performance website. We are at 98% page performance, and this is somewhere in the cloud, somewhere in America, right? Run from here. We have 100% in accessibility, so we make sure that accessibility is right. Best practices, Google gives us a 100% score, although maybe we cheated a little bit. And then we are on 90% on SEO, and that's actually Stefan's fault, because he told me I can't enable robots.txt file, because the site is very fast, and then it would be indexed by Google, right? And that wouldn't look good for the adaptTo website. So that's the 10% that we get off here. And on the other hand, we're also a fully progressive web application. So our CMS uses Vue.js as the front-end rendering. We transfer data to the client. We render the whole content on the site. That's how we get the speed, and that's how we transform a little bit into letting front-end developers do more of the components and the back-end components. All right. Just not to bash the adaptTo website, but that's the current state there. I hope Stefan considers moving to Peregrine for next year. We'll try, right? Yeah, so let me go back to the talk. Oh, actually, one thing I wanted to show, I also prepped this, so the Chrome audit is also available like on web.dev or on PageSpeed Insight from Google, so you can actually run that from the outside. The score is a little bit different there, right, because they use different versions of the tool, and this runs somewhere in Europe on WebDev, I found out, based on the logs. So we actually, in our AM practice, see now customers, the CEO from one company actually came to us and said, our page speed on this site has to go up, right? So we had to do the same things that we did here in our CMS also in AM. All right, let me go back to the slides. Where's the play button? I don't want to see the play button. Oh yeah, it's so nice. All right. So we just altered the page, right? And the current state is with that a little bit defined. The sites are near 100% in Chrome audit. Page transitions, I didn't show that, but page transitions are actually even faster. We transition from one page to the second page in about 100 milliseconds or so on a mobile device, if you're lucky. It depends on your speed. The admin UI is almost as fast. It's actually built the same way as the pages themselves. It's kind of similar to AM. And it's almost ready for a 1.0 release. I said when I pitched the talk that we're going to do a 1.0.0 release here, but there were some things that prevented that. So, and we also could use some more documentation. So now we did the demo. Let's do the agenda, right? Other way around. So we had the quick demo already, and we're going to go into why we're developing this and principles. But then when I saw this agenda, I said, like, Gaston, right? There is nothing to take away for you guys. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how did we achieve this page speed, right? Because to me, that's actually something that's important for everybody, for every site builder today, whether it's in this CMS or whether it's in, even if it's a static HTML site that you create, right? The page speed will be more and more important. So page speed, can you actually get there? When we started Peregrine, we started prototyping stuff, right? Like, should I use Bootstrap? Should I use this? Should I use, like, how should I set up my CSS? Like, we really had to prototype first for performance in order to choose our technology stack. And I think that will always be the case going forward. We will have to continue probing our technology stack, whether it can hold up to the promise, because every time, like the Chrome audit changes, we have to make sure that we're still at the top, right? So my advice is create a sample basic with set up with your technology, test it through the whole stack, right? Don't just test it on your local machine. Like use WebDev, use PageSpeed Insight, and things like that. There's tons of tools available. There's Chrome Audit. That's the thing that pops up in your Chrome. There's a Lighthouse test. That's an NPM module that's available from Google. You can just NPM install Lighthouse, and then you can run this test locally against your computer with Chrome headless browser, so it's good for scripting, right? If you have to check 100 pages, we do that quite a bit. Because the Chrome audit also complains about accessibility, we use a tool called Axe. I hope I pronounced that right. But we found that the Chrome audit is actually gives us a 100% score, even though we still have accessibility issues. So we started using that tool. And then the two websites I already mentioned, web.dev and PageSpeed Insights, they're both by Google. PageSpeed Insights only gives you the speed, versus web.dev it actually gives you the same thing as the Lighthouse test or the Chrome audit. They're pretty much all the same. And so from that, we actually found some easy optimizations. We wanted to use Sling because we're familiar with that, right? But I didn't want to reinvent the wheel from scratch. So we realized we need to combine and minimize CSS and JavaScript. We should potentially inline CSS and JavaScript. We have to use, of course, compression, right? gzip. We should use modern image formats. So Chrome actually would like you to use WebP for your images. We're not quite there yet. Almost. We have the renditions in the background, but we don't do the front end yet. And another thing, nowadays everything has to be on SSL, right? HTTPS. So if you use Apache, basically should enable SSL session sharing. That's just a takeaway from us, right? Because that improved the handshake for secondary and third connections if another thread of Apache is using the connection. So I think that's what I understood from it. Am I wrong? Good, okay, thank you. So we actually use mod PageSpeed for most of that. What in the AEM world is the dispatcher. We said, yeah, we can't use that. That's proprietary to Adobe, right? So we tested out mod PageSpeed. It's an Apache incubator project. It exists for Nginx and Apache, and it basically takes care of most of the things that the web developers don't like to do, like minimize CSS, inline CSS, right? Things like that. So also puts beacons on the page for measuring, and it does a somewhat cache similar to Dispatcher. Doesn't keep the cache there forever. You have cache flush agents, you have nice tools to flush the cache, you have a console that tells you what your cache is like, right, and things like that. So for us, it was for this CMS, it was very great. We also have some AEM customers that use mod PageSpeed on top of Dispatcher as well. The big discussion in the front-end world, right? Bootstrap versus utility-based CSS approaches. And like hands up, who is a front-end developer, who's a back-end developer? All right, no, there's a lot of front-end developers here. No. So everybody tries to use Bootstrap today, right? That's like the big CSS framework that gives you a grid and it gives you nice components. And so we looked at that, and first thing I noticed is on the Bootstrap website, they get a really high score on speed. They get 100%, right? But they actually don't use Bootstrap the way they tell in the documentation how to use it. They don't use the third-party libraries. They do deferred loading, things like that, right? So they do a lot of magic to actually get that to work. And there's another approach nowadays that's a utility-based CSS approach. And if you talk to your front-end guys, you might actually bring that up, right, in the future. So it's basically gives you a linear CSS. For us, it gave us pretty much 100 points out of the box and with like a heavy HTML page. I said the linear already. The downside of it, to me, is we're using way more time to develop with utility-based CSS, and depending on how you do, you can introduce bugs on the whole site pretty quickly, and that's kind of a downside, right? So we have to watch out for that. And the last thing in the front-end world is, in my opinion, well, it's kind of odd to say because we're Vue.js rendering, right? But how much JavaScript do we actually still need for doing the rest of the website? Do we really need JavaScript to have a toggle menu? Do you really need JavaScript to have a carousel? There's so much things you can actually do in CSS nowadays. So maybe question the use of the additional JavaScript library, right? we, for example, our site that you saw doesn't use jQuery anymore, right? It's not necessary. We have a very limited JavaScript footprint for the site itself. Then the page transition speed. So that's kind of hard to measure. We wrote a little tool, but it's kind of funky, so I'm not going to show it. When I go from page A to page B, right? I can have 100% score on the first page load. It still might take 2 seconds or a second and a half on a mobile device to get there, right? And then I go to the next page, and it's again a second and a half. Although I have to download maybe the CSS files, not because they're cached already, so I don't have to download them anymore. There is still this transition that's going on. So the page is rendered, the browser does all the math, whether the CSS applies on the page, blah, 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 right? All that kind of stuff. So we tend to an SPA approach for the websites, kind of like the SPA editor in AEM, to transmit less data. So we only transmit the JSON file from one page to the other. The CSS is the same CSS on most pages anyhow, so we don't have to reload that. The benefit that we see there is that our page transitions go down to like 200 milliseconds or so, and when you look at the browser performance, you realize that the browsers actually don't have to compute the CSS anymore, right? And that takes 200-300 milliseconds to compute all these CSS style rules. So when we just replace the DOM or the HTML on the page, and we replace the header and meta tags as well, but if we just replace the DOM, the browser actually doesn't have to do that much computation. It's really fast, right? So it's not only that we're downloading less data, but it's also we don't force the browser to do the stuff over and over again that it always does. All right. So why Peregrine? I have to rush a little bit. For us, we wanted a little bit more influence on all aspects of building a CMS. Sometimes it's hard to work with a vendor because you can't influence, right? We also wanted we have some customers that have a high degree of customizations that they want, so we want them to be able to participate in the decisions we make in the CMS. And we also wanted to learn how to actually build a website from scratch the right way, right? Because usually we just get some HTML from an agency and say, like, transfer that over, right? And there's no budget to actually say, yeah, we have to rewrite that, right? So we kind of wanted to be in the position to argue, yeah, this is probably not the best HTML, right? And for me, the first 5 minutes of using a product are kind of important. So we wanted to be able to, with the CMS, be able to build a site like the adaptTo website right off the gate, right, with enough components to actually do that. And on the other hand, we think Apache Sling and Jackrabbit Oak are awesome. So it's a way to showcase that outside of our ecosystem, right? So we can actually bring this technology to a wider audience. Because for us, it's usually hard to hire people. So it might be nice if there's a bigger pool of people that understands a stack like this, right? Our principles, so top one is be fast, be open. So we want to basically document our processes, our thinking as well, plus our failures, so others can learn from it. Not just for us, for the CMS, but for the wider web development audience. We want to be inclusive to all, so a lot of open source projects, they're for developers, right? And that's okay for most of them, like there's not the business person that wants to be part of Apache Common Slang, right? But for a CMS like this, we would like to have stakeholders and other groups like marketing and things like that also to contribute. So it's open to all, right? Not just the developers. And we want to build for today and with the future a little bit in mind. And after all, we want to bring back the fun. I'm not sure the Carl picked up on that. Okay. So who's using Peregrine? There's a couple early adopters. There's CyberCon that is building a website for Metaproc right now. There's us, Headwire. There's Hotwax Commerce. They're a commerce platform built on Apache Offbase. And our longest customer that we have is WeedGuide. It's a search engine for weed. It's actually in production right now, has been running for 2 years. It's using Peregrine and the Solar Stack in the back, if I'm not mistaken, right?
That's right, yeah.
Yes, that's right. All right, you check it out, maybe not at your corporate network. I saw some corporation block, that kind of stuff. Outlook. So we want to build a community with the CMS. The CMS will die if we don't have a community. I think we're getting there, finally. We want to focus on speed, accessibility, and best practices. Richer and better documentation, that's a big one on me. And we want to contribute back to what we actually use. So we've been trying to contribute back to the projects that we use, because they're mostly open source as well, right? Or actually all open source. We need to improve the UX performance. You saw what I did, but it's not the best 5-minute first impression, right? And that's one thing I want to do. The authoring experience is actually also just a website, so we should turn the authoring experience to be able to author the authoring experience, so we can actually just build applications with the Peregrine CMS. And we want to really work with the community on the future of the system. And with that, I'm almost done. Thanks go to Apache Sling, Apache Jackrabbit, Composum, because without Composum, we would not have started this project. It was one of the drivers for us that we could upload packages into the system. Vue.js, of course, for the front end. Trombovig is our resident editor. So that's the editor that you use in the content management system. Vue Form Generator helps us to do all our dialogues. Swagger Open API is how we document our client-side to server-side calls. We have a very lean API. Apache Maven, without we couldn't build. WSM.io, because that's how we use to upload the packages. And of course, Node.js. There's quite a lot of other libraries, but yeah. And then this is our contributors. I think we're up to like 24, 26 contributors right now from various companies that do PRs into the system. Yeah, and then the summary. Page speed is important, right? Take that back to your projects, I hope. It would be probably a good idea to start building smaller websites with Apache Sling. It doesn't have to be with us, right? It can be with Composum, it can be with the Sling CMS that's part of the Apache Sling project, right? But I think it's time that we build on that great platform as well, maybe for smaller sites in the beginning, right? And then, of course, all of you join the Peregrine community, right? To get started, we showed the Helm start in the beginning. You can also use Docker to start Peregrine. If you have Docker installed, this is the command that you have to run. You'll get the Peregrine running on Sling 11, just bare metal Java version. Or you can do a kind of more of a classic install, where if you have Node installed, you can do npm install Perkly, our command tool. So it's a Peregrine command line interface, right? -G, then it's global. And you can just do Perkly server install, and you actually get a Peregrine instance up and running within. Depends on your network speed. Please don't do it here. But yeah, it's about 100 megabyte download because of Sling. So Sling 11 is 70 megabytes the jar file, right? So yeah. All right. A couple of resources, the Peregrine website, we have a Slack channel, our Git repository, the other things I referenced, and with that, I think questions.
Hi, you said you are using Vue. As I understood, it's used in the author's view, but is it? Am I able to build sites using other front-end technologies like React?
Yeah, so we basically have a lean way for the editor to talk to the page and where stuff can be added and things like that. And from that, we do that over attributes on HTML components, so it's very lean. We currently support Vue as the main one. We support React as the rendering for websites. We support, actually the VietGuide site is fully built on React, right?
Yeah, it's a slightly different use case.
Slightly different use case, it's a headless use case, yes. We support Svelte, That's thanks to Carl, because he mentioned that last year here. And we actually support HTML rendering as well. So you can build a traditional website like you do in AEM. Does that answer your question? And JSP if you want, but that wouldn't be my choice.
Hey, you recently have started to look into some of the feature model stuff. I've seen some contribution from your side. So, like, how did that play into Peregrine yet, and what is your experience on that?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question, right? We've been monitoring the Sling community for a long time for the AEM projects, and we noticed there's an uptick in the model feature, like, can I say that right? Model feature launcher? And content package to feature launcher converter and feature model feature model converter. So and then we saw all the lineup for the talks here, and it's like, whoa, there's something coming, right? So we started testing Peregrine with these kind of things. We can actually, like the concepts that were presented in the last 2 days, we can actually support in Peregrine. We have working prototypes of that. We also, while testing this in Peregrine, we found some bugs, and we started to commit back into the Sling project for that as well. Also, our NPM installer actually uses an NPM Sling packager to upload packages through Compose to Sling, and we just donated that to the Sling community as well. So, as I said in the talk, we try to be good, right? So we take from all these open source projects, so we should also give back.
Okay, thanks.